Thaddaus Dawson here, 10K Appraisal Podcast, here on historic Auburn Avenue, on site at the SCLC Headquarters with their dynamic young president and CEO, Mr. DeMark Liggins. Super excited to be here. We'll be participating in the SCLC conference in August. We'll be able to cover that. We'll be able to cover the legacy and the transition that he is making to carry the organization forward, keeping them relevant with today's topics and issues, with fresh new leadership, while still being able to tap into the existing legacy leadership. Indeed. So go ahead, DeMark. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
I think he did a great job. He pretty much covered all. I'm DeMark Liggins. I am the president and CEO of SCLC. One of the things we talked about a lot here, is just kind of how we're going to use legacy, leadership, and love to continue to fight for social justice. And I think what we're doing here is a big part of that conversation. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to be back here. I was able to be here on a podcast with Dr. Steele last year. And so in order to keep the legacy and the engine moving, and then you and I shared a panel in Washington, D.C. at the Minority Summit, Policy Summit, which is very important. And I was really impressed with a lot of the introductions and things and topics that you spoke about. But I believe one of the things that I did speak about is that we are in a very, very volatile and transitional time. And a part of that transition is some of the, senior guard passing the torch, because it is almost impossible to be successful unless you have successors. And I think the passing of the torch from Dr. Steele to you with the vision for the future, but again, still tapping into the experience and wisdom from the past.
Indeed. And if I could use a different phrase, I never really liked the word passing the torch, because I always think the guys that have the torch, they feel like they're going to be left in the dark, right? If I gave you my light, I don't want to give you my light, right? But it is a torch, right? And one thing that they can do is light our torches, right? You can take that fire that they have. We got this bundle of potential and energy that we want to do. We just need them to help us light it, right? Because they've got the fire. You know what I'm saying? I think a lot of it is their torch light. You think about, my relationship with Dr. Steele, so on and so forth. And of course, we're playing wordplay, right?
Yeah, but it's really important. What you said is really important, because in passing the torch, a lot of times the resistance or the reluctance in passing is because if I give you the torch, then what's going to happen to my light?
Correct.
But again, I think I like what you said as far as lighting the torch. And so now I can still look back at your light and you can look forward.
Absolutely.
But again, in order to be successful, you have to have successors, and it can't be about a me or I. It can't be self-serving. It's got to be a collective.
Yeah, and that's something I want to say, and I'm proud that we were able to do that here. I think that's something me and Dr. Steele talked about a lot, particularly in our culture. A lot of times things are one generation in, and they can't figure out how to do that thing, and ultimately the actual entity is what that hubris, that self-centeredness, it kills the organization, and we see it in organizations like ours. We see it in our church. We see it in our businesses, right? That we just can't figure out how to move from generation to generation, but we need these long-lasting organizations to be, bedrocks in our community.
And as far as the business goes, I know you come from a business background, and to lead a social organization, a social spiritual organization, bringing that with the business background, because there is no mission without money. And I think what you do happens to be able to empower the people and the culture. And I want to touch a little bit on your next generation initiative as well. And I think that's very important to continue this legacy. I think a lot of our legacy organizations have lost relevance because we drunk the Kool-Aid like we made it. And in this current environment, we have done anything but make it. And that was always been an illusion, in my opinion.
So definitely a house of cards. And I think we'll start with the first thing you said. One of the reasons we looked at the Generation Now platform is I have had the privilege of being around a lot of luminary people. And they talk about this. People need to be trained. But one thing coming out that corporate background, one of the things they do a lot is they intentionally train people. It's not an accidental adventure, right? They go, we want to bring in this people, we want to bring this caliber of people, this is the schematic, these are the things we want you to know. Does that make sense?
Makes a
and
lot of
so when
sense.
we look at our Generation Now platform, it's really just trying to make sure that we are not just knowing that we want young people to be involved or younger people to be involved, and not just knowing that they would benefit from hearing the experience and perspective, but doing that in a way where we can really put it, pen to paper, where it's not just, hey, kind of hang out and everything's through just kind of this generalized apprenticeship, right?
Well,
Where it's a specific program. There's a 2-year cohort that's got very real benchmarks in what we want to do.
And that's one of the things that we're excited to be able to partner with you about is our appraisal apprenticeship program to blend in with your next
Yes.
generation programming, because we work in the appraisal and valuation space. So the next generation is extremely important. If you look at the fact that over 95%, let me take those numbers back. Over 65% of all appraisers are over the age of 50 years old. Less than 7% are under 35. Over 95% of them are white. Less than 1% of them are black. So there's nobody that looks like us in the space,
Right.
which then causes some of the problem that we have now with undervaluation in the community. So one of the other partnerships that we are looking, or we are solidifying with you, is our reconsideration of value.
Right.
And in the reconsideration of value, it's very important. It's a process that allows our community to be heard. And undervaluation, over 35% of all appraisals are considered, there's an appraisal dispute. And so there is a disparity in property values of black and brown people of roughly 25 to 30%, which is resulting in $200 billion undervaluation in real estate, $100 billion in undervaluation for black farmers, $100 billion in undervaluation in heirs property. And what's particularly interesting to you and your organization is the undervaluation of black churches.
Right.
Black churches are probably the largest black landholder in the country, and due to undervaluation, they lose $300 to $500 billion a year due to undervaluation. And I don't believe that your church members know how much their churches are worth.
No, I think that's definitely true. And before we talk about church, I want to kind of pin on something you said too, on the consumer side, right? Because we all in the same communities. What happens to me, consumer, when my house is undervalued? Because in our community, we hear all these conversations. This group of people walk to the bank and they got this, or they're living this way. Well, some of it is, I can speak because you talk about my background as a banker, right? Well, when you have consumer debt, as most of us are prone to have, where you want to walk in sometime and you want to put that in a nice, easy bucket to make it easy on your wallet to pay. That's what everybody does. But when somebody else is able to walk in the bank and their home is worth $250,000 more than yours simply from melanin, right? And we know that from empirical points where, like, this home was presented to be owned by a black person and this exact same home was presented to be owned by a white person. This is not DeMark making that up.
But
right?
a lot of people in the appraisal industry would say DeMark is making that up, that it doesn't exist.
Well, that's fair, but we've seen it happen. So, it's not very difficult to drill down to the moment. I can say, well, here's an example where that happened, right? It's not in my head. I don't make that up. And I will have any reasonable conversation with anybody, but I do not like to engage in unreasonable conversations. So anyway, we spend all day on that. You're not going to convince a bigot they're not a bigot, because that's why they're bigoted. But if you're an open-minded person, then this is just an empirical truth. Everyone knows that these things have been moved by the perception of ownership, right? We've seen real estate agents tell black folk, hey, take your pictures off the wall. Why do you want me to take my pictures
They
off
call
the
that
wall?
whitewashing. And
But there's a reason they do that, right? But my point is, for people that are listening, the reason it's important to get properly appraised is that when you say, hey, I'm mid-30s, upper 30s, and I've had this consumer debt, I've got this credit card debt, I may have this loan, your ability to go into a bank and get that into a manageable spot where you can save more money every month, am I making sense? That's real. But these things, the reason why it's important is this also goes into the conversation, not about black income. it's a black wealth conversation, right? And we actually know that as much as people love to fascinate about the income gap, which is real, that's a distinctly different conversation than our wealth gap, right? We actually have a much larger wealth gap than we have even an income gap. And because it's very hard to income your way over a wealth is situations. The reason why I think it's important what you're talking about and what kind of fuels your passion is that wealth is always going to be determined by the valuation thereof, right? And what you talk about is how do we at least get your stuff valuated correctly?
Exactly. So you want to establish the baseline, and to your point, the wealth is based on the velocity of money. So
Right.
you're not able to jump into the marketplace. You're not able to retire that consumer debt.
Right.
You're not able to buy at a better rate. You're not able to refinance your education. You're not able to
Right.
refinance your capital improvements to your property to maintain your value, as let alone increase the value.
Yep.
So all these are things that we're excited to be able to work with the SCLC and its members on. And again, it allows folks to be heard. As I travel the country, we have story after story of people being undervalued in different situations where there's a disproportionate impact. And most recently, FHFA put out a paper in November of last year, and it talked about only 10% of all appraisals utilize market conditions adjustments. So if only 10% utilize them, 90% was not utilize them.
Right.
So there's a 90% inaccuracy in the appraisals. And who do you think those disproportionately impact?
I have the well, like most things, I bet it's us.
It is. And so that goes a long way to solving that appraisal gap in communities of color. So we can continue to work on that with the reconsideration of value. It allows us to be able to articulate the argument objectively, but at the same time, it gives the appraiser the opportunity to be able to explain its work. So it happens in housing, it's happening in churches, it happens in businesses, it happens in farming, and we're able to do it all across the board. Now, this policy was recently rescinded by HUD with the PAVE initiative of March of earlier this year. The banks just adopted it. We just spoke at the Appraisal Foundation Board of Trustees meeting last week about this topic. So the GSEs and the banks and the lenders, everybody's being rather ambiguous about the process and whether or not or how they're going to actually implement it.
Right.
Who does the process better than anybody is the Veterans Administration. They offer the Tidewater, they offer reconsideration of value, and it's because they put the veteran first, before the broker, before the banker, before the builder. If the rest of the
Banks don't do that.
they need to. Somebody needs to be in charge of the consumer protection, all of those different agencies. People need help and they need assistance.
Well, let me just put a pin right there and kind of going back to the importance of what you're doing. We can no longer imagine a world where the government's going to have that there for you, right? You talk about the Consumer Protection Bureau. The reality of 2025 is that they're not going to get rid of it because that becomes problematic. What this administration seems to like to do is just completely defund the thing so that it can't exist in its proper space, right? Because they seem to not like to go through the mechanisms of saying they got rid of it. So they just defund it. They just go, well, it exists. It's very much like they did the Voting Rights Act. Oh, it's here. There's just no Section 4 and Section 5, but it exists. So then you can't say that I took it away. But it's even more important that people understand like what you do and why, because the natural protections that are coming from somebody else are going away, right? And I think that we need to be owning the fact that we are very much into what is it, Carpe Diem? Not seize the day. What is it? Buyer beware? I can't think of the word. But a buyer beware society, where when you are purchasing stuff, you have to really own your transaction, because I don't think you can imagine a world where there are these kind of entities that kind of overlay.
You have to do your due diligence.
Yeah, your due
and
diligence.
we tend to overpay and we get undervalued. We overpay when it comes to taxes and taxation. We get underrepresentation when it comes to taxing services. And in the valuation space, there is nobody that has been actively advocating for black people in the real estate valuation space. Right. Nobody actively advocating for black people in the real estate appraisal space.
Right.
And so as we, let me say, advocating with plans, with intentionality, and that makes sense and have some modicum of success. So I think there's been a lack of transparency, there's a lack of cultural competency, and this is where we have come in to fill that void, to help organizations like yours, help your membership to be able to move forward. And so I'm excited that we'll be able to participate in your conference here in Atlanta. What's that date?
The 14th through the 16th in August at SCLCconvention.com.
And so
we're excited as well. I mean, I think it's important. I think the whole work is important. I cannot overstate to your listeners, even listening to you talk. You know, it's when you talk about, oh, well, why are these things so black? Because that's the thing you hear all the time. Why is it? But it's because we see the numbers, right? And when you look at this set of numbers, something artificial is driving these negative outcomes. Am I making sense? And so it's not about...
It's driving, but sometimes things become self-fulfilling. So if you look at redlining, that was systemic. If you look at underfunding communities, that was...
But these are intentional.
Yeah. Well, intentional. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but these are specifically written out.
If you look at the Federal Highway and Transportation Department going through, following the redlining, breaking up communities across the country, over 1,260 communities were split by the Federal Highway Transportation Department. So
I mean, we're here on Auburn Avenue. The highway right here is a great example of that. I mean, they ran it down here. At least they gave us an exit, right? And a lot of cities, when they put the highway there, they specifically didn't even put an exit knowing it was going to kill. And I mean, as much as I love that we talk about Greenwood and Black Wall Street, even those moments, I would encourage your listeners to think about that. Be careful of people telling you this only happened once. Because then you put so much energy in the Greenwood.
It happened over 1,260 times.
Yeah, but I don't think a lot of people know that, right?
Across the country.
But they go, it's Greenwood. It's Greenwood, and I'm not against
And like
that.
you said, in New Orleans, it's the overpass.
Right.
In Minnesota, it's the underpass. So it's always been, depending upon the topo and the people, what has been consistent is over 70% of all the property that's ever been taken through eminent domain was taken from communities of color. And so that devaluation, and a lot of times, is systemic or institutional gentrification. So now we can go back and buy the community as it's being vacated, as we, as you say, depress the values.
Absolutely. But I think it's just kind of a bigger picture, right? I think as you talk about kind of where we are, and I think kind of November for a lot of people was very eye-opening, right? But I do think that as we kind of figure out how did we as a culture end up where we are right now, but more importantly, how do we get out of that, right? And I think these conversations about what does our community look like? How do we engage that community in a way where we can at least know how we should be fairly, in your case, evaluated? And more importantly, how can we all work together? Because I'm a big believer that our communities do an amazing job building allyship, but we do a very poor job building ownership. And I think we do that across the board. We know how to build these bridges with other groups of people, and that's a good thing. But how do we go back and build it amongst ourselves? Like, we've got to make sure that we both do it, but then to the other point about talking about the Greenwoods, understand that one of the reasons it's missing is because when we were doing those things, the greater culture around us kept blowing it up, right? Like, it was not we had communities that were self-sustained, that was full of our people, and it's not innate to us to not work together, because that's what all the young people will believe, like, oh, we don't know how to work together. That's not true. We have a lot of places where we work together. It's just, as that happened, other groups of people were like, we don't like it, and we're going to take the larger country around you or the larger state around you.
It has definitely been
and uproot and disrupt your community.
Now that part has been intentional disruption. Yeah. Either we want to gentrify and buy it from you at a very low price, then make it more valuable, or we want to devalue it by underfunding it to bring the value down and the lack of services, or we won't spend taxes in your area for the different items that are intrinsic and cause value, or as you said, in Black Wall Street and other communities, where we just gonna burn it down and take
burn it down.
And so
yeah,
that is
well, for the record, while overly investing in policing those areas that we won't invest in, but that's another forum for another day.
yeah, but that does impact value.
Yeah.
And so it impacts it negatively if you start looking and researching the police funds,
Yep.
the school system. So it's about the opportunities, but in your new generational program, creating those opportunities within the community to strengthen, I believe, will also add value. So again, we look at the SCLC as a very strong partner that we look forward to. And we don't want to partner with everybody. We want our partners to have structured integrity, shared stewardship, and cross-mentoring. So those are the things that we are looking for. Those are the opportunities that we're happy to
So
explore.
I'm sitting in a good hot cot. That makes me feel good. We made the cut.
We made the cut. So it's we all we got when we
Indeed.
get right down to it.
Absolutely.
And that's what more than ever I think we are back to. So as your membership comes, as we're able to reach out, I'm really excited about the opportunities of empowering your membership, empowering in the community, and definitely providing a platform for the next generation.
Absolutely. And I know we're closing out, but I'm looking at the fact that we're not building moments. We're trying to build momentum, right? The convention's not this kind of standalone place. Or I mean, like I said, we were together in D.C. at the Minority Policy Summit because I think a lot of relationship building is making sure that it's not momentary. You cannot stop oppression with a moment. You got to have a lot of momentum. One of my favorite sayings is that you were not accidentally oppressed and you were not impulsively impressed. So the likelihood that you're going to impatiently or impulsively become not oppressed is almost zero. Like where we sit is a purposeful adventure, and the way you get out is a purposeful adventure. And I think that's what our relationship, from your company to ours, my conference to your company, is a big deal, and I'm excited about it.
And so actually 10K is a movement. It has become a movement. And part of that movement is our Outside the Barn series.
Yeah.
And our upcoming event will be with Pilgrim Missionary Baptist Church on June the 14th. So
Okay.
that'll be our Outside the Barn. We'll be starting to advertise that. We are working on the schedule of events.
Is that here in Atlanta?
That's here in Atlanta.
Okay.
It's going to be on a Saturday, June the 14th, and we're going to start at 10 a.m. We're going to have a session on, we're going to start off with a session of yoga. We're going to have a 1 hour yoga session, work on our breathing and connectivity. We're going to have a session on reconsideration of value.
Okay.
And then we're going to have a session on regenerative farming, small farms, urban agriculture,
I love it.
how to get a farm number. I'm super excited. We have that upcoming with Pilgrim. Love for you to be able to come out to get a taste of what Outside the Barn looks
Outside
like.
the barn. I don't know about me and yoga, man. That feels like stretching.
No, it's breathing.
No, I'm
it's
joking, I'm
it's
joking,
all
I'm
breathing.
joking, I'm
It's
joking.
85,000 positions in
Nah,
yoga.
I'm messing with you, man.
Okay.
I'm a big believer. Centered people make centered decisions, right? But
Okay.
that's another conversation the other day, man. I look forward to it.
Well, thanks a lot. Again, it's
This
been
is good.
real. Appreciate our producer, Rick,
Yes,
that
absolutely.
makes this happen. Our COO, Miss Anita Ana Perez, for making everything go, the engine underneath the hood for the 10K movement. And we look forward to seeing you all. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you.